This guy built a YouTube channel showing off his massive collection of luxury fragrances. I mean, we're talking about more than 1,000 bottles of perfume or cologne, but there was just one tiny problem here. He allegedly wasn't paying for all of it.
The only problem, the Cook County Sheriff's Office says what he was giving out was all stolen. This week, the 29-year-old went from online videos to having a mugshot. He's charged with mail fraud and theft by deception. Check out the items investigators say they found at his home. The arrest report shows he first placed an online Nordstrom order for 39 fragrances. The total, $11,915.
So apparently the scheme worked well enough that when the police finally searched his Chicago apartment, they found 714 fragrances worth roughly $250,000. Oh, that's a whole lot of fragrance, dog. And on top of everything, the police arrested him on his birthday. So happy birthday, dude. So welcome to Operation Ode Fraud. So before we get into how police ended up standing inside of a man's apartment looking at hundreds of bottles of perfume, we need to actually talk about who Philip Carter really was, because this wasn't just some random dude who allegedly had enough cologne to make an entire city block smell like 1,000 third owner white BMW drivers. So Philip Carter was obviously a fragrance YouTuber. He started his channel in 2023, and eventually he built an audience of more than 3,000 subscribers and uploaded more than 100 videos. And basically, his entire thing was perfumes and colognes. He reviewed, he ranked them, he gave recommendations, and he did these massive collection videos, which ended up backfiring pretty hard on him. Because yes, at one point, Carter showed his viewers his fragrance collection, and he said that he owned more than 1,000 bottles, which is just absolutely insane. Hello? Like, at that point, you don't even have a fragrance collection. That's just inventory, dog. You are basically a retail shop or a reseller, or at the very minimum, a hoarder. But I don't think he actually was. But he would make videos about expensive fragrances, tell viewers which ones he liked, and apparently even offer fragrances to his audience. In at least one video, Carter encouraged people to join his Patreon for a chance to win a free perfume, which becomes a little bit more interesting once you know what police are now alleging, because investigators apparently believe that at least some of these fragrances may have been obtained through fraud. And this whole thing really seems to have started to unravel because of Nordstrom. So March of 2026, Nordstrom contacted the Cook County Sheriff's Police Organized Retail Crime Unit about some very suspicious fragrance returns. Someone had apparently been buying a little bit of expensive perfume and sending it back. Nothing too weird about it, except when Nordstrom started opening these return packages, they allegedly discovered that some of these expensive perfumes that they sold, they weren't there anymore. Instead, authorities say that original bottles had been removed and replaced with used bottles, or modeling clay. Yes, modeling clay. And I guess whoever was doing this wasn't just apparently throwing a lump of Play-Doh in a cardboard box and hoping that no one would notice. No, according to the Cook County Sheriff's Office, the packages were carefully resealed and they appeared untouched. So from the outside, everything looks somewhat normal, but on the inside, I mean, congratulations, Nordstrom. You just sold someone a luxury fragrance and in return got some sort of like arts and crafts project back. And I guess that kicked off a whole investigation with perhaps the greatest name law enforcement has ever came up with in the last few years. Operation Ode Fraud. So investigators, they started digging through financial records, internet records, shipping information, and other evidence. And eventually, authorities say that all of that led to one person. The fragrance YouTuber with a ginormous perfume collection, Philip Carter. So one of the Nordstrom orders tied to Carter contained 39 fragrances, with the total price being $11,915 on perfume. Speaking of BMWs, that's like a third owner used 2011 335i. So it's like, hey, do you want a 335i that may burst into flames at any moment, or 38 bottles of perfume? Both of them are extremely flammable. Only one of them lights themselves on fire, though. I digress, but according to Nordstrom, after he received the delivery, he contacted them and said, hey, all of these perfumes, they were intended as gifts, but they didn't want these gifts, so I'm just gonna return it. So apparently Carter, I guess, knows 39 very picky people, but more importantly, he allegedly told Nordstrom that the packages were in perfect condition and haven't been opened. And remember that quote, because when Nordstrom finally received these untouched fragrances back, they discovered some of them had been opened. happened. And authorities say that bottles were either missing or have been replaced, but that didn't stop Carter from trying this again. In fact, the more I read the story, the more I'm convinced this guy had some sort of problem here. Maybe an addiction, or he's just plain stupid and thought he can get away with it. Who knows, maybe a combination of both. So in March of 2026, he placed another Nordstrom order, and this time it was 8 fragrances worth $2,145. And this return is where things got kind of awkward, because instead of mailing everything back, Carter allegedly drove to Nordstrom at Old Orchard Mall in Skokie and tried to return the fragrances in person. Maybe he just wanted to get a different kind of high off of this, so he just raised the stakes, because I don't know why he would just wander in to the people that could be, I don't know, the people who he was defrauding. Why did he want to defraud them to their face? I guess returning it to the mall just wasn't doing it anymore for him, so he just wanted to do it over the counter. But that ended up being a massive mistake, because a sales associate started opening the packages right there in front of him and quickly realized that something was very wrong here. The fragrances appeared to have been tampered with, and just imagine being this guy. He's just standing here and he's watching, I guess, his master plan fall apart because he was dumb enough to show up in person. It would have fallen apart regardless, but the fact that he was there, why would he just watch his own demise? Well, regardless, I don't know, especially because Carter reportedly only returned 3 of those 8 fragrances, so he didn't really get away with it either. But there's another order, because on the day before that trip to Nordstrom, Carter had placed an online order of 4 more fragrances. Those 4 alone cost $3,085. I mean, these are some really expensive perfumes. I didn't really know perfumes got up there that much. Like, I've heard of the $100 bottle of, wait, what is it? So divided by 4, so what, like 800 and some change? I was wrong. It's 700 and some change. Like 770. What's a $700 perfume? Okay, so this would be like Baccarat Rouge. What is a Baccarat Rouge? Oh, there's so many videos of people reviewing perfume. That is interesting. Watching someone review a perfume over video is a little bit interesting to me, because like I understand watching someone review food, because you can kind of hear and see how the food tastes in a way, if that makes sense. But with perfume, you wouldn't get a different visual experience if I reviewed a $20 cologne or a $200 cologne, because you would see me spraying it on myself, and then I would go, yeah, that smells like something. And then the other one, I'd be like, oh, that smells a little bit better. And the viewer's kind of sitting there like, I don't know. It just doesn't quite make sense to me. But hey, to each their own. There's a whole bunch of niches that I don't understand. ASMR is one of them. I will never understand the appeal of ASMR. But I am also the same person who would sit here and watch an hour-long video of some obscure World of Warcraft lore. So I really don't have too much to say. Regardless, he ordered those 4 perfumes for like $3,000. And then a few days later, he called and said, hey, I would like to return these as well. And according to the reporting, he didn't really give a reason why, but at this point, Nordstrom had apparently seen enough. Honestly, they went a little bit too long before they actually did something here, especially after that first shipment of, what, $11,000 of perfumes, and suddenly a bunch of them were missing. That right there should have been enough. So Carter is now accused of defrauding Nordstrom out of about $15,000, but here's where this case gets so much bigger, because authorities don't believe Nordstrom was necessarily the only retailer involved. Investigators have also been looking into whether other stores were also hit by the same alleged scheme, because after Carter was arrested, a judge granted him a pretrial release. But according to the Chicago Sun-Times, there were certain conditions here, and Carter, he was ordered to stay away from Nordstrom locations, which definitely makes sense. But he was also ordered to stay away from Ulta Beauty. And at least from the reporting we have right now, Nordstrom is the retailer at the center of all these charges, so I am curious to see what investigators eventually say about any other stores, especially because police finally searched his apartment, and the amount of perfume they allegedly found was way beyond the roughly $15,000 that Nordstrom says it lost. So on July 22nd, investigators with Cook County Sheriff's Police organized crime retail unit, they showed up to Carter's apartment in Chicago with a search warrant. And this is where Operation Ode of Fraud went from weird to absolutely ridiculous, because according to the sheriff's office, investigators walked into that apartment and recovered 714 fragrances. 714! Buddy, what are you doing? Why are you living in an apartment if you have 714 fragrances worth $250,000? You could be a homeowner and not have 700 fragrances. Again, to each their own. And there is a very important distinction here. That doesn't mean that Carter is accused of stealing $250,000 from Nordstrom. The alleged Nordstrom fraud detailed in the reporting is just around $15,000. The $250,000 figure is just the retail value of the fragrances police say they recovered from his apartment, and investigators are reportedly trying to determine whether other retailers may have been affected, like Ulta for example. But the perfume itself wasn't the only thing that police say they found. Authorities also recovered boxes that allegedly had been opened, resealed, and were ready to ship. And they also found packages that contained modeling clay instead of fragrances. So yeah, I mean, they found modeling clay. This guy was clearly all about his Play-Doh. They found a whole lot of packaging materials and of course, glue and a heat gun. This is like a low budget version of the wine scammer in that Netflix documentary. So essentially, police are saying, hey, we didn't only find like 714 bottles of perfume. We also found all of the required items to do what he's accused of doing. It seems like the dude at least had some sort of illegal arts and crafts operation going on. And I do think this proves that these returns look normal from the outside and the boxes had supposedly been carefully resealed. So I guess if a refund was processed before someone thoroughly inspected what was inside, the retailer could have potentially sent the money back, only to discover later that he only returned like $300 worth of perfume. And apparently this is a much bigger problem for retailers than you might think. So according to a report from Appriss Retail and Deloitte, Americans returned about $685 billion worth of merchandise in 2024 alone. And apparently an estimated $103 billion of those returns were fraudulent, so about 15%. Okay, I'm starting to understand why Amazon has me take so many pictures of any item if I want to send it back. Now, that number includes all kinds of return fraud, and there are obviously people who return different products than the ones they bought. People who falsely claim packages never arrived, and people who use something and then return it. And retailers have a pretty difficult balancing act here, because if you make every legitimate customer wait 2 weeks while somebody conducts a forensic investigation on the sweater that they returned, people are obviously going to be upset with that wait time. So in many cases, refunds are actually processed before the returned merchandise is properly looked at. You have a guy named Thomas Borders, who's the vice president of operations of Inmar Supply Chain. He explained the problem to Business Insider, and in quotes said, in an effort to avoid customer dissatisfaction, retailers will process customers' refunds before items are properly assessed and any damage is identified. And then he says this results in premature refunds, leaving retailers with very little recourse. And that is basically the weakness a scheme like the one Carter is accused of would exploit. Like, make the package look untouched, send it back, get your refund, and hope nobody would actually realize what's actually going on behind the scenes until the money is at least in his account. Except investigators say that Carter had another potential problem. He was getting all these fragrances while also running a YouTube channel where he showed off his massive collection. Uh-oh, self-snitching alert!
Guys, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, this might be my favorite part of the whole story, because during their investigation, detectives discovered Carter's YouTube channel. You know, the channel where the dude spends years talking about perfume and showing off his expensive bottles of perfume. And in one video, Carter reportedly said he owned more than 1,000 fragrances. I mean, what does the evidence locker even look like in a case like this? This is just crazy. Actually, scratch that. What does the evidence locker smell like? What does the whole police facility smell like, honestly? I wonder what his apartment smelled like when they walked in. They walked in, they were just like, whew. Like, I just know his apartment gave you a headache the second you stepped in. It's like funny to imagine. You're investigating a guy for fraudulently obtaining luxury fragrances, and then you discover he has an entire YouTube channel where he basically gives you a guided tour of all of the alleged stolen merchandise. Jackpot. Hello? But again, Carter's only been charged at this point. Authorities will still have to prove all these allegations. And we also know that every fragrance Carter has ever shown on his YouTube wasn't fraudulently obtained or allegedly fraudulently obtained. But the investigators clearly thought that the channel was relevant enough to mention it when announcing their case. And there's also another part of Carter's content that looks very different right now, because Carter apparently told viewers, at least in one video, that if they're subscribed to his Patreon, they could potentially receive free fragrances. Uh-oh.
I'm always going to recommend that you check out my Patreon page and leave a donation, and you may be eligible to win yourself a free fragrance. And with prices for fragrances escalating and inflating ever so rapidly, perfumery is becoming very, very expensive. So save yourself some money. I want you guys to save some money.
Yeah, I'm sure you wanted to save some money, so he wasn't just giving them away. Oh, and the investigator believes fragrances sent to viewers may have also been stolen, which means that there could be people out there who, I guess, received a fragrance and they thought that, you know, he sent it to them, but in reality, he stole it first, or allegedly could have stolen it first, and then send it to a viewer. I subscribe to a Patreon, and all I have to show for it is some stolen merchandise, if I was lucky enough to win it to begin with. But also, at the end of the day, at least they got some merchandise if he did send it out. Because, I mean, hey, if he allegedly scammed Nordstrom, I wouldn't be, like, shocked if he allegedly scammed his audience and didn't actually send out any perfumes. But he started this whole channel in October 2023, and he uploaded more than 100 videos, and eventually got a little bit over 3,000 subscribers, and then he stopped because his last upload was on July 1st, 2025. And the title of that video was, "These 5 fragrances smell like money." Hey, they smell like money, and apparently the investigators smelled something else. Carter, he didn't publicly explain why he stopped uploading, and importantly, the investigation that we know of didn't really begin until Nordstrom contacted authorities in March of 2026. So I'm not really saying his disappearance from YouTube had anything to do with this case, because at the end of the day, we don't really have evidence of that. It's just a weird title to have on your channel when literally 1 year later, you're accused of running something police literally named Operation Ode Fraud. And then of course, as if things couldn't have gotten worse for the guy, the day he was arrested was his birthday, July 22nd. Dude woke up, thought he was gonna open a present or two, maybe some cake. Instead, he opened the front door and saw a government agency standing outside waiting for him. Oh boy. And when they walked in, they found enough perfume to open a small Sephora or something like that. But regardless, Carter was taken into custody, and the following day, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office approved 3 counts of mail fraud. He also faces 3 misdemeanor counts of theft by deception, and Carter was later granted a pretrial release, but with some very fragrance-specific ground rules. Stay away from Nordstrom, stay away from Ulta Beauty. I don't know, that might be the first time I've ever seen those kind of bond conditions, but hey, there's always a first for something. And that's pretty much where this case stands right now. Carter's been charged, he's been released, and now we just kind of have to wait and see what happens. And the craziest part about all this is he's theoretically facing up to 18 years in prison for this. Obviously, there's no way he's ever gonna get that, but imagine facing 18 years in prison because you tried to smell nice. And I guess you couldn't afford it, so you had to scheme. And then you had to flex it on YouTube as well. Would have maybe gotten away with it if it wasn't for not meddling kids, but himself posting it on YouTube. Sometimes people just self-snitch. But hey, I mean, if you're new here, feel free to subscribe, drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Peace.